New York, New York. If you want to get a good glimpse of the New York skyline, go to the Brooklyn Bridge. If you want to have New York inspiration, go to the Statue of Liberty. If you want New York shopping, go to Fifth Avenue. If you want New York baseball, go to Yankee Stadium. If you want to be really depressed in New York and be saddened and get caught in a pit of despair while in New York, go to 44th Avenue. And there you will see what? The National Debt Clock. It's a huge sign if you've seen it in the Big Apple, right? It weighs over 1,500 pounds. It's about 25 feet high, about 70 feet long. It has 306 light bulbs. And it daily and incessantly and without mercy keeps track of our national debt, and it keeps track of how much each family owes. Well, we really don't have to go to the Big Apple to find a debt clock. Did you know that? Did you know that you don't have to travel to New York, New York to find a debt clock? All you have to do is what? Look into your own life. You've got a debt clock. I've got a debt clock. Everyone on the planet has a debt clock, right? We are all pros when it comes to keeping score and how much people owe us. Every cold shoulder, every unanswered email, every snide remark, every slight, every failed promise of every person. Oh, we are so good at keeping a score on what people owe us. We all have a debt clock. We're in this sermon series, right, called the Red Letter Challenge. We're looking at the red letters of Jesus. It's a discipleship challenge. Many of us, most of us, are going through it, St. Michael, in the months of September and October. And the challenge has 5 pieces to it, right? Being with Jesus. Forgiving, that's what we're looking at this weekend, right? And then serving, giving, and going. And we're using parables from St. Matthew's Gospel to understand these discipleship characteristics of being with Jesus, forgiving, serving, giving, and going. And today, of course, we come to a very famous parable of Jesus, Matthew chapter 18. And you guessed it, it's all about what? It's a frontal attack against what? Our personal debt clocks. So here we go. We need to get the setting of the parable. Familiar words. Peter comes up to Jesus and says, how often should I forgive? We ask that question, right? If you've been married for longer than 36 hours, you've asked that question, right? If you have teenagers, you've asked that question. If you have little rugrats, you've asked that question. If you work for a boss, you've asked that question. How often should I forgive? Forgive is a uniquely Matthean concept. That is to say, Matthew alone accents forgiveness. What do I mean by that? Mark, Luke, and John, of course, talk about forgiveness, but not like Matthew. Matthew uses the noun or the verb, forgive or forgiveness, 49 times. 49 times in his gospel, Matthew uses this idea of forgive. That's 1/3 of all of its occurrences in the New Testament. So if you, like me, struggle with this whole concept of forgiveness, you go to one book in the Bible, Matthew. So how often should I forgive? Of course, this whole narrative in parable only appears in Matthew, not Mark, Luke, or John. No big surprise, because Matthew is all about forgiveness. Peter's ready to go 7 times, right? 7 times. That's the going rate for the Pharisees in first century Palestine. 7 times. The 8th time, let them have it. So Peter's going 7 times. What the Pharisees teach. Jesus answered Peter. Boy, Peter, he's just shocked at this. Not 7 times, but I tell you, 77 times, right? What does that mean? Continuously. Continuously. So what is forgiveness? Forgiveness is not a feeling. Let's just get this out front and center. Forgiveness is not a feeling. Let's face it, if we forgive when we feel like it, we probably won't ever forgive. Forgiveness is not a feeling. Forgiveness is something I do. It's an act of my will. And forgiveness is not analysis. Analysis looks back to learn, and that's important. We've been hurt, bruised in a relationship. Look back to learn. That's analysis. But that's not forgiveness. Forgiveness doesn't look back to learn. Forgiveness looks back to leave. Leave the pain and the heartache in the past. Does that mean I forgive the greedy corporation? Yes. Does that mean I forgive the big bully down the block? Yes. Does that mean I forgive the emotionally distant spouse or parent? Yes. Does that mean I forgive my boss? Yes. How often? 70 times 7. It's a life of forgiving. C.S. Lewis once wrote, "Everyone thinks that forgiveness is a lovely idea until they have to forgive something." And then the rubber hits the road. Many people, when they're hurt, they're disappointed, they're flushed down the toilet, what do? They seek revenge. Other people just run away, right? Run away. Turn their backs. Still other people get lost in a world of resentment. This pretty much summarizes the history of the human race up here. And I don't say that out of criticism or judgment against anyone. This whole idea of seeking revenge or running away or being filled with resentment, I know all of that. Forgiveness for me is just as hard as forgiveness is for you. Sometimes forgiveness is mightily difficult. But get this, folks. Forgiveness is the only way forward. It's the only way to recover from a hurt. Forgiveness doesn't mean I forget it. Forgiveness doesn't mean I put on a face and pretend it never happened. Forgiveness means that I lay down my accusations and my pity parties and my hard heart at the foot of the cross. Forgiveness means I align myself with the red letter words of Jesus. It's the red letter challenge. Lord, how often should I forgive? Up to 7 times? Jesus says not 7 times, but 77 times. That's the setting of this parable. Peter's exchange with Jesus. So the parable has 3 scenes. Scene 1, scene 2, scene 3. Scene 1 is the pity. Now let me just state something that is very biblically insightful. The first scene in the parable comes first. You're saying, come on, that's insightful? Well, folks, that's the best I got. But it's very important. The first scene in the parable comes first. What do I mean by that? Divine pity and pardon and forgiveness always comes first. The death of Jesus, the shed blood of Jesus, the forgiveness of Jesus always comes first. This is the foundation. This is the fountain. This is why it comes first. There's nothing we can think, say, or do to be forgiven by Jesus. He takes the initiative always. So the first scene in the parable comes first. Of course. When he began to settle. Now the he, earlier when the parable begins, Jesus uses the word king. So the he is the king. Got it? There's only one king, finally, in Matthew's gospel. That's Jesus. He's the King of Kings. And he's talking about the kingdom. So the he here is the king. And he begins to settle accounts. One was brought to him who owed him 10,000 talents. So in ancient Greek literature, 10,000 is the highest number. Everybody got that? That's as high as you can go in ancient Greek literature. Now in modern English literature, what do we talk about? Billions and trillions and bazillions. So think here bazillions. Because this is as high as it can go in ancient Greek literature, 10,000. You can't go 10,001. You can't do that in Greek literature, Greek language. There's not a number for it. So 10,000 talents. A talent is a monetary unit, much like an American dollar. So how much is 10,000 talents? A talent is worth 6,000 denarii. Now that didn't help you a lot, I get it, right? What's a denarii? A denarii is a day's wage. So if one talent equals 6,000 denarii, do the math, 10,000 talents equals 60 million days of work. And you think you've got a long road to retirement. Think of that. You owe 10,000 talents. That's not only 60 million days of work. You can do the math. That's 184,000 years of work. So get started. This servant who serves the king is in way over his head. He says in the parable, give me time and I'll repay. Ha! Can't repay 60 million days of work, 184,000 years of work. So there's this debt clock, right? 44th Street in Manhattan, New York. There's a debt clock in my heart and yours. But there's another debt clock. It's in heaven. And I've got really bad news for all of us. That debt clock is keeping track of what? All of our unanswered emails, all of our cold shoulders, all of our snide remarks, all of the promises we have made that we have not kept. And this debt clock in heaven, oh my gosh, it keeps running. Day after day, week after week, month after month. And you know what? We are in debt up to our eyeballs. We have to file bankruptcy, folks. We owe 10,000 talents. So forget winning the lottery. That won't cut it. That won't make 184,000 years of work. Forget going to payday loans. They won't even take you at payday loans. We are stuck. But remember, the first scene in the parable comes first. Why is that? God takes the initiative. And here it is. The servant's master, remember that's the king. Behind the parable, that's Jesus, took pity on him, canceled the debt, and let him go. Oh my gosh. Can you imagine this? 1 minute, I owe something that's equivalent to the U.S. national debt, and he's going to take away my wife and my children. I got to sell all that I own, and the next minute, everything is intact. Why is that? Here's the Greek word of the day. Splonk nizomai. Why do I put that up there? It's translated pity in the English Standard Version of the Bible. But behind splonk nizomai is the English word spleen. See, splonknos is the Greek noun for your gut, your insides, your stomach. And that's where we get the word from splonknos. We get the English word spleen. Well, what's your spleen? Your spleen is where your emotions are, right? Right here is where it feels, right? Right in your gut. And the king doesn't cancel the debt just by hitting the delete key on the keyboard. He doesn't just take an eraser and erase the debt. He does that, but he doesn't do it callously. He does it with great emotion and feeling. The God of this kingdom, the only God, the true God who made heaven and earth, this God has pity upon you. He's got a spleen. He's got a gut. It's splonk-nizomai. And that's finally what prompts him to cancel the debt. And Jesus says that's the way the kingdom of heaven works. Splonk-nizomai. And if you want to see divine pity and the splonknos of God in action, actually delivering emotion and feeling and compassion for you, you just look at the King and the kingdom. Jesus knew that we were spiritually bankrupt, that we had no chance of paying off our debt. And that's why Jesus the King, he went to the horror and the bloodshed and the nightmare of the cross. And you know that from the cross, Jesus didn't say, I pay for some of your sin or most of your sin or pretty much all of your sin. No, not pretty much all your sin, all of your sin, past, present, and future. He says in John chapter 19, verse 30, it is finished. That's one word in Greek, tetelestai. It means paid in full. Did you know that? Paid in full. Past, present, and future. Why is that? Splonk nizomai. Jesus loves you. And has a heart and compassion and a splonk-nos to the point that he is willing to go to the cross. You see why the first scene in the parable comes first? It all flows out of divine pity. Splonk nizomai. So we go now to scene two. Scene two. This is shocking, right? Shocking. But when you think about it, you look at your own debt clock, you say, well, no, this is pretty much what I expect. This is what I do. This is what people do to me. The payback. When that same servant went out, remember he'd just been forgiven 10,000 talents, 60 million days of work. He found one of his fellow servants, we do this quite often, who owed him 100 denarii. Remember, a denarii is a day's wage. So this is 100 days of work. And I've just been forgiven 184,000 years of work. And what do? And the I here is not just a homiletical preaching I. This is I. This is what I do. And so do you. We seize people. We choke them. Pay what you owe. I remember. You're not getting off that easy. Pay what you owe. The payback. How shocking. How human. Holding on to a hurt is like drinking poison and waiting for the other person to die. Holding on to a grudge is like taking a loaded shotgun, pointing at your head, pulling the trigger, and hoping your enemy is hurt in the recoil. Holding on to resentment destroys us, sucks all the joy out of our lives, and makes us miserable, small, little people. Resentment not only destroys me spiritually, it destroys me physically. Do you know this? There's all this medical research that tells us what resentment does to our bodies. Medical researchers tell us that if we're harboring a hurt, we are 2 times as likely to have a stroke, 3 times as likely to have a heart attack, 4 times as likely to have unhealthy cholesterol. If we're holding on to a grudge, our chances of diabetes and some forms of cancer go way up. The upshot? Holding on to a hurt isn't healthy. It destroys us. Body, mind, and spirit. So we've looked at the pity. The first part of the parable is the first part of the parable. Divine pity, splanchnizomai, and then shock of all shocks, we move from pity to the payback, and when we live with the payback mentality, it takes us to scene 3. We get stuck in prison. You need to know that ancient prisons were nothing like 21st century American prisons, folks. Ancient prisons were holes in the ground. They were caves. They didn't feed you. They didn't give you water. They put you there to kill you. So when you go to prison, game over. Then his master, remember that's the king of the kingdom, summoned him, the man who had been released 10,000 talents. You wicked servant. The master, the king is livid. You don't understand how the kingdom of God works. See, I forgave you all that debt. 60 million days of work. You pleaded with me. Oh, why did he forgive splanchnizomai? He's got a spleen, a gut. This is God we're talking about. And should you have not had mercy on your fellow servant as I had mercy on you? Well, of course. Of course he should have. But he didn't. And neither do I. Neither do you. So he gets stuck in prison. In anger, his master delivered him to the jailers until he should pay all his debt. Until he should pay all his debt, again, do the math, you're going to pay off 10,000 talents. You will be in prison for 184,000 years. There is a better way. It's called forgiveness. Forgiveness breaks the chain that strangles my neck. Forgiveness sets me free. Forgiveness may not change the person you forgive. That's not the point. But forgiveness will change you. You will be more alive, more whole, and more following after Jesus. Forgiveness refuses to repay evil for evil. Forgiveness repays evil for good. Forgiveness lets go of the past so I can live in the future. Forgiveness lets go of the hurt and the heartbreak so I can live and love again. Forgiveness sets me free. So we could summarize this entire parable by Palestinian geography. What? Yes, we can. We can summarize what the Bible teaches about forgiveness, and especially Matthew 18, by looking at Palestinian geography. Hey, you can figure this out, right? All of the water in the area comes from Mount Hermon, modern-day Syria. It flows through Caesarea Philippi, comes to the Sea of Galilee. From the Sea of Galilee, this water flows down the Jordan River to the Dead Sea. About a year ago, about 35 St. Michael people were floating in the Dead Sea, right? We were there. The Dead Sea is the lowest place on the planet. Folks, the Dead Sea is dead. Nothing lives in the Dead Sea. And here's the point. First scene of the parable comes first. God in Christ forgives us with this fresh water, living water, and it comes and flows to us so it can flow through us. And if forgiveness doesn't flow through us, forgiveness dies, and our life is like the Dead Sea. What a waste. Everything's dead. My relationships are dead. My heart is dead. My spiritual life is dead because forgiveness flowed through me, but I didn't let it flow through me. So we have a red letter challenge. Lord, how often should I forgive my brother? Up to 7 times? No. Not 7 times, but 77 times. It's a red letter challenge, the red letters of Jesus. To do what? Live a life full of forgiving. How about we stand and sing about it?